Hi, this is the November 2021 meeting of the Kentuckiana FileMaker Developers Group, and today we are going to be listening to Robert Naud or no. How's that
No.
pronounced? It's pronounced no because he's French. Uh, Robert is a French Canadian and uh, has that wonderful accent that we all like, and is going to be talking to us today about a piece of software that he has discovered that he really likes and wants to share around. And Robert, tell us a little bit about your past. What brought Robert to this point in his life?
Well, I've been doing FileMaker work in the consulting space since 2005, and I've been working for different platinum partners all over the place. So in the US and Canada, and after a little while, I felt like, well, it sounds like I got a good hang on this. I feel like I could be doing this by myself. So in 2019, I started my own company and then became partner myself, and that's it in a nutshell, if I may say. So yeah.
Okay, you thought you were just going to be a developer. Now you're a businessman.
Well, I don't know exactly how to title it. You're a bit of everything, in that chair. So and I'm sure you know a ton more than I do on it. So perhaps that would be your session, right?
I learn more all the time. Um, yeah, it's when you stop learning, you die. So that's my motto. All right, so Robert, you were telling me about this product. It was called what was it,
Ham.
fmHAM, and
Hmm.
and how it's really great with controlling access to a file, and it's a good way um, to manage that. So show us what you were telling me about.
Yeah, I'll be making a distinction in it's not about controlling access. It's about controlling privileges and authorization, but it serves no purpose in terms of the authentication part of things. Um, so, and the module itself was authored by, and well, is authored by Charles Delf. He's a smart fellow, and when I learned that this module lets you do a couple things that were on my wish list for quite a while, I made it a point to make sure I look into it. And now that I've looked into it, I'm like, wow, there's even more than I was asking for, So it felt like Christmas before Christmas. So and Charles has been doing some
Can you let her out?
presentation on this. And yeah, so Charles has been doing some presentation on this, and he's been um, uh, telling people about this. And on my end, when I first got to see his presentation, it was a lot about the concepts, and I think it can give you some mileage, understanding what the building blocks are and so on. But the analogy I would like to do is to me sometimes, if I can recognize that there's potential with a pile of Lego bricks, if I see an assembled kit, then it's easier for me to relate to that and say like, oh, that's what I want, or I'll take this and I'll swap it out and then I'll make it my own. So I'm just doing my own twist on presenting fmHAM with a demo file that I've put together, or well, it's based on a sample file that's available in FileMaker. So we're going to look at that together, I guess, as soon as I'm able to screen share. And here we go. Awesome. So I'm assuming everyone can see my screen. Awesome. So yes, so fmHAM is a module, like I said, built by Charles Delf, and the project is on GitHub if anyone wants to look it up. It has some collaborators also, and HAM stands for headless authorization module. Okay, and actually it's both headless and tailless, in meaning that it has no UI and it has no data store. Okay, so it's really meant to be portable, and for that it uses a global variable. But if someone wants to secure that further, it's totally possible to use it with a global field that would be secured. And it's also possible to encrypt the contents. It's just for demo purposes. Looking at stuff that is encrypted is not going to be telling us much, so it's not part of the demo we have together today. It does use a JSON structure to store the privileges. And when I say privilege, you can equate that to authorization, whatever vocabulary you prefer. The native version of HAM only supports one level of JSON, meaning your keys cannot have periods in them. I've customized this implementation here to allow for that, but in terms of the feature set, it's the same feature set. It's just that I happen to prefer looking at my authorization in that format, and that's about it. So on what it does that is somewhat exclusive and that was very compelling to me is that it lets you define groups in a way where you can tell of a group that it will inherit the privileges from another group. And that is very powerful. And I don't know of a way to achieve this. I'm going to say natively in FileMaker, even though everything we're going to see today is native FileMaker. There's no plugins, there's nothing at all. And the module, like I said, on GitHub, it's out there. You can go get it for free. So, of course, if you define groups that inherit from one another, you have to watch out for circular references, because that can throw you in for a loop, pun intended. So yeah, let's just keep that in mind. And it also lets you assign multiple groups to a single user, something else that is not really possible to achieve in FileMaker. And on top of that, it lets you evaluate some expressions at runtime. So we're going to see how that plays a role later in the demo. And in terms of minimum requirements, it does require FileMaker 18 because it makes use of the while function. And you do need to have defined all of your groups and all of their respective privileges in a JSON object. And then your users need to have groups. If a user doesn't have a group, then it can't really play friendly with this. So the file we're looking at is based on the FileMaker template file for assets. So we're looking at an asset record right now, and I used this file because there's both asset and employees were close enough to user records for our needs. So by the way, I didn't mention that earlier in the presentation, but if you just feel like having a question or anything, just unmute yourself and make sure to ask away. It's not there's no slide, there's no presentation like I did last year. This is all demo, and if there's anything at any point that you feel like asking about, make sure to ask. Don't wait for later in the presentation. So if I go to our employee records, over here we have different people and a little Venn diagram at the bottom. The Venn diagram is not dynamic or anything. It means nothing. It's just a picture. But I use to put it there because sometimes we think of Venn diagrams as being almost always symmetrical, you know, with the same overlaps and everything. And I feel like what we do see in the real world, especially when we're talking about security groups, is something that is closer to what's on screen right now, you know, where you do have groups where there's a lot of overlaps, groups where there's no overlaps. For instance, all of A and all of E do not overlap at all, just the same way all of D and all of C do not overlap at all. But all in all, we have 14 intersections in those different groups there. So if we wanted to implement this, I'm going to say again, natively in FMHAM or with what the security model gives us, we'd have to quite literally implement something where there would be 14 privilege sets, and to each of those privilege sets, we would assign privileges, and there would not be any inheritance. So if there is something, for instance, that belongs in AC that I need to grant to AC, I would also need to grant it to A, and I would also need to grant it to C, or in the same fashion, if I need to revoke it from AC, then I need to ask myself, well, revoking it from AC, should I revoke it from A and from C also? So there's a lot of maintenance that comes with that. And when you have inheritance, one could argue that it makes it easier to manage. So if we go look at our employee records or user records, okay, over here we have a user, so first name, last name. We have the account name. We have the privileges that are tied to the account itself, and we have the group tied to the account itself, and the privileges that are tied to the group. Okay, so in this demo file, there is no UI that is dedicated to the groups. It's really merged together with the employee screen. So whatever group the user is in, if you are assigning a new privilege over here, you're assigning it to the group for whoever belongs to the group. If there's 5 users in that group, all 5 of them will be getting that that privilege. So user privileges are optional. You can totally have an account where there's going to be no single dedicated privilege. And if they are defined, though, they do take precedence over any group the user belongs to. Okay. We also have a main group. So over here, we can say here is the inheritance. So the administrator group also inherits from buyers and sales staff. And we have to keep in mind here that because there could be conflicting items in those groups, the order that we put them in will matter. So basically, the last one will win over anything that is up above. And if there is things that do not conflict at all, then you just get the sum of it all together. So, and over here, we have something that lets us define things where our user could be in more than one group. So if I want to see groups that are superseded by the administrator's privileges, I would put those groups over here. And if I want the groups I'm adding to supersede the administrator privileges, then I'll be adding that over here. Okay. So So things are really cascading in terms of inheritance. And for example, if you have, I'm going to say groups that are reflecting junior, senior, and lead, you can say, okay, I'll define my privileges for the junior group. And then in the senior group, you just say it's going to inherit junior, and then you bonify it with some extra privileges. And then in the lead, you simply say, okay, it inherits senior, and then you bonify it with whatever you want, and it will, because senior itself inherits junior, then the lead will be inheriting the whole chain. So so if your setup is more simple, there's no need to assign people to multiple groups. There's no need to have every group inherit from something else. The tool itself is just that flexible. You can use as little as you want or as much as you want. And all the UI that we have in here is in itself not required. Like I said, as long as you have a JSON object that is the dictionary for all the group's privileges, and that you know for a given user what groups he belongs to, and what are the overrides that are specific to just that user, then you're good to go. So let's have a quick look at our staff here. We have Julie, who's the administrator. Okay, so she's able to do a bunch of things, and over here, asset price limit is set to 10,000. We see over here that I'm storing things that can bonify what is in the group privileges. I can also use it to store things that are not necessarily privileges, but preferences, text size, window dimension, favorite color, whatever you feel like at that point. So if we look at our next employee, we have Samantha, and Samantha belongs to our buyers group. Over here, we see that asset price limit is set to 2,500, but she's probably one of our senior buyers, so her asset price limit is actually 50-50. And that sounds like half and half. So it's 5,000 some. So, and that's it. If I keep looking at another staff member, we have here Eric, and Eric is part of the sales staff. He's able to edit the asset, but we apparently don't want him to be editing the asset price, and he's got some preferences there. If I look at Jeffrey, well, Jeffrey is also a buyer, and in price limit, he must be junior because we are taking his price limit and bringing it down to just $1,000. So who else do we have in here? We have Fred Johnson. So Fred, he stands with the corporate group, and the corporate group is inheriting from East, West, and Central. So we're going to revisit that later in the demo. And then we have Romeo, and Romeo is simply a user I'm using when I need to look at different groups, because there's no interface for groups. So I'm not going to be logging in as Romeo, but if I need to peek at groups, chances are I'll be coming on his record to look at different groups. So, all right. So let's have some quick tests together, okay? I'll be logging in as Eric first. And I'll go to the added record. Not quite why my system is spinning right now. Okay. So Eric, if I come over here and I try to set the price, even if I try to set it to 9,001, it says that the profile does not allow you to modify this value. And because we see this being a custom dialog, we know that what's taking place here is happening with a script trigger. Okay, and script trigger is not security per se. So I also have the same in a field here where there is no script trigger. So if I try to change the value again, then I get this over here, which triggers a validation. So even if I say, okay, the record is not committed yet, it just is waiting for things to be valid. In this case, I can't really make that value valid. So I'm simply going to revert the record and be back to where I started. Okay, so some people will say, well, validation is not security, and I'm not sure that I'm going to go into that space for our needs today. To me, that's close enough. Okay, and if I go then and log in as Jeffrey, okay, where we know Jeffrey is able to make an edit, then so let's log in as Jeffrey, and then I'm really unsure as to why my system becomes unresponsive just after that. I don't think there's anything in there that is really process intensive. So so as Jeffrey, I can come in here, okay, and still if I try to set that to 9,001, now the message here is different. It tells me that the amount exceeds what I'm allowed to, okay, and if I go over here, well, I don't really get to customize the validation message, but we know that this amount is not within the range of what is allowed for Jeffrey. So I still need to revert my record. Although if I come in here and say, well, that's close to his limit. So let's see if that's gonna let me through, and that does go through. And same thing if I go in here and type a number that is within the limits, then we are good. Okay, so that's good news. Now, let's see what happens if I was to connect as a full access account. Okay, so I'm going to do login as, I'm going to say manage database just to show that we are indeed connected as full access. So now I can go back to our assets. Perhaps I should say to our asset because I only have one record in here. So Julie is full access. So let's see what happens if I put 12,000. So 12,000 tells me, wait a minute, it exceeds the value. And again, here we know that there's a script trigger catching that. Okay, so I could set it to 9,000. That would not be an issue. Over here, without the script trigger, if I set it to 12,000, well, that even if I'm full access, validations do apply to full access accounts. So so I still can't change that for the value I want, even if I'm full access. So so here we have good news, I believe. So so let's have a quick look at one more account before I look at what things are set up under the hood. If I look at Fred, okay, Fred is corporate, and we see that in here, and I guess you'll have to take my word for it, that none of the East, West, and Central allow edits to the asset record. So if I'm logged in as Fred, and I then go to the asset record, now, even if I try to edit the name, okay, let alone the price, then it tells me my access privileges do not allow you to perform this action. And this is like native security. It's not a validation dialog. It's not a custom dialog. It's really security that kicks in and tells me, hey, you can't do that. So let's have a look at our setup to see how we got to that. And so to achieve this, I need to be logged in as full access. Back over here. So I'm going to go to layout mode. So if we look at the script trigger we have on here, okay, we can look at the script itself. Basically, all that is happening is two checks, okay, and the two checks are calling for the custom function that ships with fmHAM, and it's called ham check privilege. In my case, the way I do name my privileges, they're named in a way that most of the time I'll be adding in my head at the end is allowed, you know, so asset price edit is allowed. So in this case, I'm saying, well, if it is not allowed to asset price edit, then I'm just going to say, hey, you just can't do this, you know, and then I revert the record and get out. Same thing, if this passes through, now I have a second check, and that check tells me, okay, well, let's just make sure that our price is within limit. You know, if the price is greater than my asset price limit, then show custom dialog again, saying, hey, that's more than you're authorized, you know, and then you revert the record and exit. So that's pretty simple. And in terms of readability, I would say that it's nice and clean to read something like that. So now we saw that there was also a price field with no trigger at all. So we're gonna go look at the setup for the price, and I already said it was a validation. Okay, so let's have a look at this validation. So the validation is taking place by calculation, and over here again we're simply saying, hey, for this to be valid, the price needs to be under asset price limit, and you need to be able to edit the asset price. You know, that's it. If those two checks are met, then you're good to go. Otherwise, you're going to get to see this this validation message, you know, and I'm sure we all have that on our Christmas wish list for this to be something that could be calculated, but it is not the case. So it is what it is. We're dealing with what we were given, and that's it. So I'm going to be exiting out of here. And the last thing was, okay, let's see for all of what we've done. At the end, we had something where editing the record, just the name of the asset was showing up the security message. So let's go have a look at our security. So in security, obviously, like full access, the full access account is on full access, but then everyone else is simply on one I'm sorry, privilege set. And if we look at that privilege set, I just called it everyone because to me it's a privilege set that everyone uses, and in there the customization is pretty simple. I went in, okay, and I said, okay, asset is limited, and the limitation is going to be coming from one field, and I chose to name that field record edit is allowed, and I chose to deploy that field in all my tables, okay. The calculation behind it is different in every table, but over here, to do my setup, I simply say, okay, record edit is allowed. I copy that to my clipboard. Okay, I get out of here, and then I go to the next one, and I say, okay, edit is limited. How is it limited? Well, it's limited on record edit is allowed, and it keeps going and going. So I just paste the value into all my tables. Same thing for the delete, where I go in here and I say, okay, how is it? How is deletion limited? Well, it's checking for record delete is allowed. That makes it super easy to set this up. And even if there was something where, I don't know, for some users, we would not want them to be able to export, then I could easily just duplicate the whole privilege set, and not have to think about, how am I going to tailor this? And then within that duplicated set, then I would say, okay, people in this set don't get to print or don't get to export or whatever else that I can't calculate, basically. So I'm gonna get out of here. And so the one thing we didn't quite look at was, what is it that we have in terms of record edit is allowed and record delete is allowed? And no surprise there, it's an unstored calculation, okay? And all that it says is check privilege for asset edit, and again, every time I read this, I, like, in my head, I hear that voice that says asset edit is allowed. So so it's pretty easy to copy those from one table to the next, and then just make sure to update them so that they reflect the right privilege. Okay. Any questions?
So we're custom functions coming up, I reckon, and the privilege set that everybody other than full access is sitting on time. Oh, never mind. I just the custom function, I think, is what I'm excited to see.
Okay. Okay. So we'll perhaps we'll look at it a little bit later, but the minding of the module itself is that the custom function will take care of what it needs to take care of. You simply use it where you need to use it. But yeah, we'll be sure to look at this.
So talk about the so like if I download this demo file, you obviously have all the scripts and all the custom functions in that file. Is it just a matter of copying them over into your solution, or do you need to build a table to track all this?
Well, I chose to build a table for my privileges, like making it so that in here, for my employees, that I could have a drop down and say, okay, there's this, there's that, okay. And same thing for the groups. Mind you, those two portals are pointing to the same table, just not the same relationship. So basically, if we look at our list of tables, on top of the naked ham, if I may say, I said, okay, I have asset vendors and employees and assignments. That was already part of the template. Okay, so I rolled out privileges. So that's just the actual entries that I'm giving to each of the groups or the user, and then I created a table for groups. And then privilege assignment is just that's the join table where I say, okay, this privilege belongs to this user, or this privilege belongs to that group, and that's it. Okay. But so if we look at our relationship graph, I have my employees, and employee privileges is the left-hand side portal that sits in the middle on the screen. Okay. And then when I look at employee and I say, okay, with the group name of the employee, show me the group privileges. Those two tables, have the same source table. It's privilege assignment and privilege assignment. Okay, and this tied to groups, and like I said, there's no UI for the group table itself, and so on. So there's not a ton of things here, but quite literally, the only thing you need, if you don't even have any of that, and if you feel like your security setup is somewhat static, okay, all you really need is something to store your definition. Okay, so over here, I'm going to show like the global field where I store all of the group authorizations. Okay, so here we see, okay, administrators, what is it they can do? Oh, they can have an asset price limit of 10,000. They can delete employees. They can create employee privileges. They can do those things. Okay, and then buyers, what is it they can do? So that's the dictionary for all the groups. Okay, every single possible privilege assignment is in there, because when the when I do my relogin and it runs a setup, okay, the function that performs the setup needs to have the full definition, because if there is any inheritance, it needs to be able to scan across all those groups to be able to merge everything and flatten everything into this one thing that says, okay, for your session, here is what you can do, and that's just that, So if you say, hey, you know what, I don't need to have tables and tables of like privilege assignments and privileges and groups and whatnot, I can just get away with putting this text into a global somewhere in my system, then HAM is going to work for you also. You don't need the UI, you don't need those extra tables. You can have a very light and trimmed down implementation, and it still is going to work. In order for you to customize the privileges, you're going to need to come in here and do text edits on the JSON. Does that answer the question, Jonathan?
So yeah, so you might want to, but you don't have to have tables.
Correct.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Basically,
you do it
like,
all in a text in a global variable built from settings for the individual and the groups.
yes. So in my specific case, I chose to make it so that at login, I say, okay, look at all the groups, bundle up the privileges together and put that into a JSON. If you have another mechanism that gives you the full list without having to scan the groups from a table, you're good to go. You can skip that altogether.
Okay.
It's just like for demonstration purposes to say, oh, here is what you can do, and so on and so on, and have me do edits in a JSON text. I feel like it doesn't speak the way people are connecting with what's possible and so on and so on. People usually they think of their systems like, okay, well, I do have a users table and I do manage my groups and so on. So I kind of skinned it in a way that there are things that are more user facing here, but it's not a requirement. If you want to say, hey, I'll start with this and start with something basic, and later on, you can throw in the rest of the UI later. Everything and anything is possible. It's really up to you.
So I'll let other people ask questions, but do one more quickly.
Mhm.
What about security? Is this something that um, a nefarious player could get in and muck with? Does this create more vulnerability for the solution?
Like I said, if you don't like to have things where your things are, because right now the system uses, for portability reasons, the module is meant like, okay, you take this, you copy paste, and it works. Okay, so for that, it cannot rely on fields, and you can't, in FileMaker, you cannot secure access to your global variables. Okay, so if I take a look at what we have over here, like ham config, um, that's the JSON that tells me what I'm able to do. Okay, and when I run the custom function to test for, hey, can I do, like, what's my price limit? It queries against that JSON. And yes, it is in a global right now. Okay, but you could very well change ham and say, okay, either this is going to be encrypted, so mocking with it would be one step harder. And you can also say, well, I don't want to rely on a global variable. I want to rely on a global field because I can then secure the global field with FileMaker security. So it's really, you choose how you want to implement it. There's different flavors, if you may say. What I'm showing today is very a notch above vanilla, because there's UI that we get to see and so on, but it's not the full feature set where you could say, okay, well, I want to customize that so that I'm using I'm sorry, a field instead of the global variable, and I want to have, say, an encryption key, and keep in mind, if you do use the encryption key, when you're going to query for the custom function that says, okay, ham check privilege, every time each of those queries, you're going to have to pass along the key for the custom function to decrypt the thing. So if you think that someone will be able to get to a global variable, well, perhaps they'd also be able to get to some other parts of your scripts or wherever you're going to be making those calls and see the key in plain and so on and so on. So at that point, it's up to you. I mean, this is a tool. I'm just showing what we can do with it, and I think it does a lot that we cannot do in a more traditional approach. And if you have concerns on that angle, I think there are ways to mitigate that, but feel free to
No, I wasn't
to dig in.
criticizing
Yeah.
the presentation. What I was just wondering, what you thought about more, bulletproofing the approach. But yeah, no, I understand. It's just for demonstration purposes. But so
Yeah. Well, I think everything is there for someone who wants to tighten down every nuts and bolts.
okay. So other questions?
Yes, Robert, can you go back to the relationship graph, please, sir?
Yes, absolutely.
And let's see, just to take group privileges, and would you hover over the title? Very good. Okay. And what about employee privileges? Very good. File access protection enabled in both places. Very important. And one other, you say there's a minimum version of this, and it was what, 18?
18 because at its heart, the custom function that will go through the that will go through the JSON and merge it down to say if there is inheritance and things like that. It does rely on the while function, and the while function was introduced in 18.
Okay, thank you very much.
So
Did you want to post where you said this was on GitHub?
well, the original fmHAM is on GitHub. This demo file, if anyone just goes to my website contact page and fills in the contact form saying, "Hey Robert, can you send me the demo file you used for fmHAM?" I'll be happy to send a copy of this file to anyone who requests it.
And the name of your company page?
Yeah, I'll just put that in the chat. It's accolade plus accolade / contact, I believe, but let me just get that in 1 second. All right, and if I go here.
So, hey, Robert, if you're ready, when you're
Mhm.
ready, I have an architectural question. I was looking the other day at a similar system, not identical in architecture, similar.
Mhm.
And it was part of a multi-file deployment. And essentially it was similar in the sense that it had accounts, representing people logging with an account, FileMaker native
Mhm.
account, privileges and a join. It didn't have the group structure, but it had all that. And it was architected as a separate file that was utilized by many individual files in a multi-file architecture. Would you say this particular architecture with the value list, not the value list, the validation and the custom function, which looking forward to seeing, could be deployed in a multi-file deployment?
Absolutely, you can deploy it in a multi-file. If you do deploy in a multi-file, your options again, because like I said, the vanilla implementation will rely on a global, so if you do your initialization, you just need to make sure that it carries over to I'm going to say to the next file. But if you tweak the setup for it to not rely on a global variable, but to rely on a global field instead, then as long as you have the same table occurrence name in all of your solution, then you should be able to just call the function without having to run the setup from one place to the next, as long as you've ran the setup in your, I'm going to say, core file, because if you open your other file before the setup is done, then the check will return a negative for anything you check for. So it'll say, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do that, and so on and so on. Does that sound good?
I mean, it's hard to say exactly with that. I mean, one of the architectural decisions that comes up quite a lot is script functions versus custom functions.
Mhm.
And then, for example, if you're in a single file solution, which is where you've got the domain structure, which is assets, commingled in the same file with the security structure, which we've
Mhm.
seen. And then if you split it into assets being just purely assets, and your security structure is more of a kind of a drop-in into multi-file solution, drop in the security, you might be inclined to look at the custom function to see if the functionality that it provides can be centralized in the script function, and if that architecture can maintain security. In other words, script functions versus custom functions, a bit more dry.
If you have the flexibility on relying on script and you want to centralize that, you're free to do that. That said, the custom function, because it is a function, you can use it in places where scripts can't go, So for instance, on the layout here, and I really need to change my machine, I guess. So once we have Node, anyway, if I want to hide the plus button at the bottom, I could use the custom function not to really enforce security, but as a hide condition. It would returns like my 1 or 0 just the same, and I cannot use a script in a hide condition on a layout object. So depending on what you use it for, it could be that you're going to be able to say, okay, everything is centralized, and we're always going to be pulling from the script that is in the central file. Or it could be that you're going to be like, well, yeah, I'm checking for things by script, but I also need to check for things by calculation. So
yeah, I mean,
it's
that's a completely valid
to
point.
choose how you want to roll it out.
It's a valid point, and that all said, just riffing here, just brainstorming, is when you looked at the field validation, you're utilizing a custom function in the calculation, and before you showed it, I was just trying to guess. Oh, I wonder what they're doing, and I was thinking, oh, maybe there's a double $ variable in there that's been retrieved. It's certainly true that of all the things that you can protect through security, scripts would be the easiest with a centralized structure. The other things I think could be achieved. But that all said, this is the one that I was looking at the other day. It's similar but different. So it's interesting to see the presentation and the differences of approaches that people take.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there is a couple more things I want to show, and it's tied to our friend who's in the corporate account. So before we look at corporate, we said corporate is overseeing east, west, and central. Okay, so let's just have a look. So central, we have every value for the matching privileges key set to 1. Okay, and then in the east one, we say, okay, asset price limit is set to 1,000, and then other stuff sum is set to 2, and then other thing max is set to 13. Okay, and if I look at the west, I have price limit set to 100, other things set to 1,000, and my sum to 3. Okay, so basically, if I'm saying, okay, I am corporate and I want to quote unquote inherit from east, west, and central, okay, if I want to be sure that I get 1,000 from over here, okay, because it's the maximum, and I want to get 1,000 for the price limit, okay, there's no way I can stack my groups in a straight inheritance line where I'll end up, because the key exists in each, I have other thing also defined as 13 over here. And so because the key exists in each, whatever sits on top of that inheritance chain is going to override the larger values in the rest of my chain. So for that, the HAM lets you define keys where there are suffixes, okay, and there's suffix of max and sum, okay, and as you can guess, it's going to make the max of all the groups that you inherit from, okay. So we want max to be 1,000 for the price limit. We want other thing to also be 1,000, not 1 and not 13. And for the sum, we had a group where it had 1, a group where it had 2, and a group where it had 3. So we'd expect the sum to be 6. Okay. So if I go and look at my my friend Fred, and I log in as him, and I go look at my data viewer, okay, and it's locked because I'm not full access, and no surprise here, like for demo, I don't want to be typing and typing. So the admin account doesn't even have a password. Actually, no single account in this file has a password. So here, if I look at $flat, and $flat is just a courtesy thing. You can completely remove it from the system. It's really ham config that is being used, but the one that says flat is already having a nice JSON format. And so here I see that my price limit is 1,000. Okay, I see that my other stuff is set to 6 and other thing is set to 1,000. So that is awesome, because then even if my underlying groups have no relationship to each other, it's not like a sequence like I had before, you know, junior, senior, and lead. It's really like S, West, and Central, and maybe they're each going to have their own thing, and one's going to be higher, the other one's going to be lower. So how am I supposed to set the right inheritance? There is no correct inheritance where I can stack that's going to give me what I want. But by using the _max and _sum suffix, then I'm able to really pull just the values that I want to get from that. So that's really great in any type of solution. You know, there's a lot of scenario where group inheritance alone will not let you achieve what you need, but this is really adding to the set of tools. And also, say if you have a vertical solution, okay, where maybe you are having a pricing that is plan based, you know, like bronze, silver, and gold, or light, pro, and ultimate, then having something like that really lets you say, okay, well, maybe you have a plan that lets someone, I don't know, send SMS messages, you know, and on the light plan, you get to send 100 a month, you know, and on the pro plan, you get to send 100 more, and on the ultimate plan, you get to send 200 more than everything under, you know. So then you can customize that, and if you end up increasing the light plan, well, because your privileges are already defined as a sum, you don't need to go and tweak anything up the chain. You know, you've done what you needed to do, and you're good to go. So that's really really awesome. Okay. So, and into this group, we also have an entry called rolling credits _eval, okay? And we see that it's just a calculation, okay? And I know that not everyone likes eval, so if you don't like it, you don't have to use it. But if you do like it, it can let you do a couple nice things, okay? So for instance, over here, if I cancel out of this, we get to see that the rolling credits are really defined as, okay, they get current date times 100, okay? So we're the 23rd, okay? So I'm going to expect this to say 2300, okay? So if I go in here and I say ham check privileges for rolling credits, okay, keep in mind, like the suffixes, you use them when you define the privilege, but then when you call for them, okay, because perhaps there is a rolling credit that exists at the user level, you know, that is not evaluated, that you set a value and you want that to rule over everything. So we don't want to have to test sometimes with the suffix and sometimes without. You know, the function is meant to always test just without any suffix, and it does the work for you. Okay. So in this case, it's going to give us 2300, and tomorrow it's going to give us 2400. So there's a lot of things that you get to do this way. If you want to say, okay, that user can, I don't know, run this reports, but only on Mondays and on Wednesdays and on Fridays, but not on Tuesdays and not on Thursdays, then you come up with the calc, and it's gonna just do that. So So more power to you, I guess. So just one more quick word I want to tell about the employee and the groups. So when we saw the groups, we could say, I think I want to go check for Eric and say multiple groups. So let's see. Eric. So Eric, I've said to him, well, he's the group special bundle ABC, but he's actually in there 3 times. Okay. So if we go look at my special bundle ABC, okay. So special bundle ABC has the bundling, okay, set to 25, but it's a sum. Okay, so if my user has purchased my special bundle 3 times, then I would expect that he would get like 75 credits of that bundle thing, you know? So let's go see if I log in as Eric, provided it lets me click on it. And I bring the data viewer and I say, what's my bundle thing? And I think again here, I'm just going to look at the flat version. So bundle thing gives me 75. So that's again one thing that I'm glad for. So, and that's because I'm able to have my user belong to more than one group. And in this case, it's even a group like the same group, but multiple times, because it does make a difference, you know, but it could be that it's going to be different groups altogether. And this is really a lifesaver, you know, because picture that you have someone who is going on vacation and you need someone else to backfill for them. Well, instead of having users like share their passwords and stuff like that, or having you scratch your head in saying, okay, how am I going to grant all those privileges to so and so? If your groups are well defined, you can come in here and say, okay, well, I need to add this group here or this group there. And again, we have the choice here in saying what's going to supersede the main group that my user is in. Okay, so let's take a school example that's really out there. Okay, if we have a principal and a janitor, okay, and my principal leaves for vacation and the janitor needs to fill in for him, well, chances are, if there are any conflicts in between their respective roles, okay, so my janitor's main group is going to remain janitor over here, okay, and then I'm going to say, I want the principal. Well, in this case, I can't edit once I'm logged in, but I would come under and I would set this to I would say grant the group of principal to this user. And if there's any conflicts between the principal and the janitor, then the principal would win. You know, the other way around, if I have the principal and the janitor, and now the janitor is going on vacation, you know, and if there's any conflicts in between the two groups and what they can do, well, my principal, he would remain principal over here. And in the additional groups, I would add the janitor role to the list over here that says it's superseded by the user's main group, because I don't want my principal to be losing any of his privileges because he's filling in for the janitor. So so you have something that is really, really flexible. It's great for things like that. Like I said, if you have people going on vacation, if you have people wearing many hats, if you have a vertical where you have your plans, but on top of your plans, you say, okay, well, you can purchase this one more thing à la carte. So that lets you deal with all of this, you know. And if you've seen, like in all my users right now, I've made a group called disabled features, you know. So and it overrides anyone's group. So if I go in and look at disabled features, okay, you can, well, I can't change. Okay, so I really need to relog in. Just give me a second. There we go. Not sure why my machine's just hanging there. All right. So we're going to see in the group of disabled feature, you know, I created a privilege called more stuff and another called new stuff. And so more stuff is set to 0, you know. So I can literally quote unquote kill a feature for everyone in the system, roll it in the existing groups and say, okay, my sales staff are gonna get this feature and no one else. And if I'm developing, you know, as a developer, I can grant myself the privilege for more stuff, okay? And then once I need this to go live, I can come in here in the disabled group and then just delete the record, you know, and then it's going to become available to just the folks who needs to have access. Or I could create a developer group, you know, and then not rely on adding the privilege to other people, you know, just make sure that I add the developer group after the disabled feature group and put in there what I need to have. Perhaps if I'm asking someone to test to grant them that group and so on and so on. So there's a ton of flexibility in there. And even here, I have something where new stuff gets evaluated, you know, so it's not a hard 0. It says, okay, let's say I want to roll this out. When are we going to get new stuff? It looks like we're going to get new stuff on January 1st of 2100. Okay, so that may be a bit far out, but you get to choose the date and time, you know, and this is going to return 0 as long as your current host timestamp is under, and once the current host timestamp is greater, it returns 1. Okay, so at that point, I guess the group is not wearing the right name anymore because that feature is not disabled. It's quite literally enabled, and not only is it enabled, it's enabled for everyone because you've granted this group to everyone. But sometimes there are those features that you plan to roll out for every single user, and if you know the date and time that it's going to become active, then you can rely on something like this. So there's really a ton that you can do. Like I said, yeah, like user pref and say, okay, give me this, give me that, and it does its thing, because basically what the custom function that checkpriv is doing is really looking, okay, in my ham config, you know, give me the key that I'm being asked. And if the key that you ask for is not there, it returns 0, you know. So by default, it's saying, no, you cannot access this thing. It has not been granted to you, even if the key is not present. Not just that it needs the key to be 0. If the key is not there, by default it is 0. So, and if we then go look at the things that I've put in this file for it to work, okay. So in terms of custom functions, so we have 3 custom functions that are coming from HAM. Okay, one more here that I'm using that relies is being used. I'm sorry, for making sure HAM can use the dots in the keys. Okay, and FM list to JSON array is simply something where when I have lists with carriage return delimited lists in my groups, saying, okay, you inherit from those groups, or in the additional groups that I'm granting a user, those are like, this function just turns that into an array, and then it sends that to the function that does the setup. But it's not, you don't need this per se to use fmHAM. Okay, so basically, if we look at check priv, it's asking for privilege name, and then you have options. Like I said, for instance, if you have options of the encryption key, okay, then it's going to say, okay, I need to decrypt the content with that, and so on and so on. Okay, so the custom function itself, I'd say you don't really have to touch it too much. It is outputting errors when there are some, so if you have, for instance, a JSON object that lists your privileges that is not valid JSON, then it's going to return the error into the global variable ham last error, and that's about it. I mean, ham config is to do the setup. So it's asking, okay, what are all of the groups? Who's the like, what's the user in terms of what are his groups, and then and his overrides, I think, or maybe options is override. I forgot about that. And the utility is really it's really a bunch of different functions within one function. Normally, I would not design things like this, but in this case, I think Charles made a choice to say, okay, we're not going to create a bunch of functions. We're just going to roll this out in here. So that's that. And in terms of scripting, the only thing I've got, on first window open, I'm doing something that lets me get basically a JSON that I put into my all groups authorizations that we've seen, the whole dictionary that says, here is what every group has in terms of privilege. And then when I say logging as, I'm running the first window open, because in my case with the demo file, I was changing the privileges so often that my global was no longer reflecting what I had, but technically you don't need to have this in there. So the login as is just calling to a couple things and then runs the setup, and running the setup is where the magic happens. Okay, so basically in here, I'm saying, okay, who's my user? Let's make sure that I get all of my user overrides, the privileges that are exclusive to the user, into a given JSON, and tell me what groups my user is in. Is it a single group? Is it a multiple group? So based on that, my group format is going to be either a JSON string or a JSON array. And then ham config is where it all happens. We call ham config. What we pass in is like all the authorizations, okay? And then what's the user? Okay, so a user is a group, and keep in mind, this can be either a single group or a group array, and the user authorizations as a JSON object that are the overrides. And then in options, I guess it's again the encryption key and stuff like that you get to set. You can also say, okay, use like a default configuration if you have a default configuration that you can insert quite literally in the custom function itself to fall back on its feet if nothing is defined or so on and so on. So that's really all there is to it. But ham config, you normally you'd run that at the beginning of the user session, and you would forget about it. The only thing that you do then use is really check privilege where you need to use it. Is it in a script? Is it in a hide condition? Is it in a field validation? Is it the return of a unstored calc? All those things, and from there you're good to go. So over here we have some credits. So huge thanks to Charles and all the contributors for fmHAM, the GitHub where the original samples are available here. And also big thank you to Steve SSH, because I relied on a custom function that he published on fmSoup to make sure that the fmHAM would let me build the JSON with dots in the keys. So I think that's it. So the floor is open if anyone has more questions. One last thing before I close on this, I would say when using names for your privileges, if you're using JSON, just make sure not to step on your feet. Meaning that is called x.edit, and you set it to 1, and then you have another privilege that is called table x.edit component equals something. Well, is configured just mentioned, because like no key can be a substring of your key. Basically, that's what it is. All right.
Hey, you were breaking
So I
up a
hope,
little bit, Robert.
yeah.
See,
I'm
you were
really
basically saying
sorry about that.
that's okay. So you were basically saying that you needed to watch for the periods, the dots in your JSON keys, because it might imply that something else was its child.
Correct. So,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to get there right now. So if I create something here that says, right, and one more. So if I have those two keys and I expect those two keys to be in any given JSON, well, this really ends up being a value that is part of this. So you cannot define them, the two of them. You know, you need to make sure that your keys are not substrings of something else, because otherwise it's not going to play friendly with your JSON.
Would a simple solution be to just not use periods?
You can. It's just, again, it depends on your preference. For myself, when I'm looking at groups, I kind of like to have things nested like this, you know, to say, oh, what can my administrators do with employees? They can delete the employee, or they can create a privilege, delete a privilege, and edit a privilege, you know. Whereas if everything was flat, you know, you get like employee delete 1, employee privilege create 1, employee delete, employee privilege delete 1, and so on and so on. So it would be very I feel more like verbose, and we wouldn't really get the hierarchy. But you're totally right. You don't need the JSON structure for HAM's feature set to shine. You know, that is just a preference.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Yeah, I guess you're right. If you need the periods, you should use them, but don't use them indiscriminately.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
That's a amazing tool you built. Thank you. You know, obviously, yeah, we know that Charles built the
Charles did,
original
yeah.
concept, but you did a really nice job of pulling together what he was intending to do into a real world demo file. That's great. I'm going to tear into that. So again, your address is in the comments, and people can go there and send you a contact message and request the copy of the file. So,
Mhm.
So next month is December, which means that we're not going to have a regular FileMaker meeting. Typically what we do in December is, in the past, we've gotten together for a holiday gathering where we share food, you know, in a face-to-face, you know, in meat space, as they call it. So obviously there's a whole bunch of you that will not be able to participate in that. You know, I mean, you're totally welcome to, but it involves driving or flying or whatever. But so for those of you unable to attend that, we'll see you all in January. Again, the fourth Thursday, fourth Tuesday. December, for those who are interested, December will be on the third Tuesday to stay away from the holiday a little bit more. To try not to add to the crunch of parties and stuff at the last minute. So we'll have a note going out about that and what we're going to be doing. And the rest of you all, if you're unable to join us in person, although you're entirely welcome.
Jonathan, you may take a look at that, because the third Tuesday is the 21st, just before Christmas. I thought we were going to make it the 14th, the second Tuesday.
We're going to switch to, oh, yeah, we did talk about that, didn't we? It's funny that the 21st could be the third. Wow. So we should have it on the 4th. On the 28th. No, yeah, the 12th is good. 14th.
14th.
Yeah, 14th. Okay. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. I was on autopilot and forgot about that. Yeah. So we'll have a note going out about that. So Robert, thank you again, and we'll see everybody in our next video. Of course, will be January. This is going to be recorded and up sometime in the next few days on our YouTube page. Those of you who don't know, you know, the link that you get when that gets posted goes to the individual, but you can always check the page address to see all the videos that we have up. Currently, there's about 10 or 12 videos up there of presentations over the last year or so. And they've been getting traffic too. So it's pretty cool. All right, well, thank you, and everybody have a great
So Jonathan,
holiday.
if I may,
Yes.
your presentations are actually some of the best. And for those who just can't get enough, I'm dropping a link in the chat of all the user groups around the country who have videos. There's like one page where you can see what
Good. Thank
more
you.
the merrier.
Yeah, because those of us who are presentation bingers have plenty to participate in.
Yeah, there's about 12 groups that have recording. There's probably more, but 12 that I've noticed that record at least occasionally.
All right.
By the way, thanks for the show.
You bringing that up? Yep. See y'all next year.
Bye all.